Today's a late one. How you doing? Here we are again. So today is step 9. Step 9 is made amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So in taking step 9, we're talking about the people that are on that list from step 8 that you may or may not be ready to make amends to. But when the time comes, sometimes that opportunity shows up if you're willing. And I think that's part of the key to step 9 is make direct amends whenever possible. So it might be face-to-face, it might be over the phone, it might be a letter, it might be some other form of communication that is what we would consider direct. And obviously that's pretty much the case if people are still here on the planet with us. There is some tricky stuff when people have passed that you can still make amends, believe it or not. And some people think, well, what's done is done, or finished that chapter with that person, so I'm gonna just forget about it. But really the amends are for you, not for them so much. The amends are to clear your conscience. The amends are to bring you back to a blank slate or a clean palette, whatever you want to call it. The amends are in your best interest, basically, to have a feeling of, let's say, closure for that person and yourself. So obviously if they are still on the planet and you can reach them, you can then do a direct amends. Sometimes it's as simple as I'm sorry I did fill in the blank. Other times it might be like, you know what, I realized I really didn't do something that was very nice. I really want to make amends. Maybe I owe them money. A lot of people who have had a shady, let's call it a shady past, when they get to this place in their lives and they want to make amends, it can be very difficult, but they do have to go back to whoever that person is, or maybe that store, or whatever the case may be, and that's called making direct amends. It's paying back what you took that you shouldn't have done. So there's that very direct type of way of doing things. And then of course indirect could be you'll probably never find that person, you can't see that person anymore, they're not around anymore, whatever the case may be in that regard. And then what you want to do is there are ways of making what you want to do there is have a sense of, let's say maybe prayer, giving it up to the higher power. Maybe you need to make the amends to their family members because you can't reach them. So there's lots of different ways to bring yourself to a place where an amends is kind of putting things back into their rightful place, their rightful balance. And when somebody has passed and you know that, some people go to a gravesite and make a direct amends there. Other people write a letter and, then burn it, send it up into the universe. Maybe they want to do an amends to that person's family. If the person isn't there anymore, they can do it anonymously even. There's lots of ways of making amends when you've done somebody wrong and you want to make it right. You want to correct an error in judgment, let's say. So I think for me, that is important. And also some of the things that I think about, and I talked a little bit about it yesterday, is when I've done something like, say, to my kids in the past, or especially my kids, because as a parent, You get stressed out at times. You do some, things you wish you hadn't done, things that you are not proud of, things that are maybe abusive. So the best way to make amends in a case like that is to really change how you interact with them now, to do your best to have a better relationship now. And that's one of the things that's not always easy to do, because, sometimes your kids kind of mirror your behavior. I'm sure you've probably recognized that once or twice in your life. So what they do that really ticks you off is probably what you do to them, or the way that you guys interact. And nobody likes looking in the mirror that way. So it's really sometimes hard to change your whole attitude or change your whole way of being with them. But, little chip at it, chip away at it. Make little tiny baby steps. Maybe recognize it when you say something or do something that you didn't want to do. In our family growing up, there was a lot of sarcasm. And, the word sarcasm comes from the Greek word to tear flesh. So not a pretty picture, as you can well imagine. And that's one of the things I try my best not to do anymore. I still do it. Don't get me wrong. It still happens, especially if I'm overtired. I think, when you're overtired, stressed out, or any of those, what I always say, HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. HALT. So hungry, don't deal with it right then. Angry, don't deal with it right then. Lonely, don't deal with it right then. Tired, don't deal with it right then. HALT, stop, don't do anything about whatever it is right then and there. Sometimes you have to leave the situation, leave the place, leave the house, whatever the case may be, and just stop where you are in your tracks until you are in a better frame of mind. That's always a good thing to remember, is HALT. And don't do something at that time. So I still find myself at times, doing that, or putting that dig in, or, making a snide remark or what have you. It's easy to do because they're buttons, you installed them, especially on your kids. So it's something that I'm aware of, and certainly far from perfect when it comes to that. I'm sure they would concur if you asked them. But I do actually want to have a good relationship with my kids and the rest of the planet, but particularly them. And so any family members, I am more conscious now, but I'm still far from perfect at doing it. It's still something that is not an easy thing. And I sometimes find myself reverting back to the behavior of the past, if I'm with a sibling or if I'm with the kids or something, and something comes up, So step 9 is definitely an interesting step. Like I said, to me, it's very much a place of maybe putting things into perspective and knowing that I don't want to have harmed someone and then not recognized it and done something about it. So if there's people on that list that we talked about yesterday, you guys, oh, hi Janet, I'm glad you're listening live. Cool. I hope you're having a cup of coffee or something with you. If you have that list and you are in the middle of looking at your list maybe and the people on it, and maybe there's people on it that you really absolutely will never make amends to. You can feel that way about that right now. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. And that's something that is okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with having that and just letting it be. You don't in other words, you can go through all these steps and you can get to that place where you've done your step 8 and you've written a lot of people's names down, or maybe yourself too. And this is an ongoing thing. This is not something that is going to get fixed tomorrow. Certainly if you've lived, 50, 30, 40, 50, 60 years and have done things. Everybody's done things. There's nobody out there that's perfect. If Jesus walked on the planet now, I'm sure there would be things that he did wrong. There's probably, I'm going to guess, but of course, then again, he wasn't quite human, right? But in his human form, people in their human form do things. So cut yourself some slack, but recognize it, and then realize that you want to make things right. You want to do something different about whatever that situation was. And, you know, as I told you yesterday, when I talked about my oldest daughter, my middle kid, she is definitely an introvert. And like I had said, when I was talking about that book and I read that book about it, I'm like, oh my God, this poor kid put up with me her whole life. And just last year, I realized she's an introvert, and I really was, you know, I wasn't on purpose doing things harmfully, but it was just a recognition, you know. And so I work more at trying to honor that, trying to be different for her because she is an introvert. Recognizing when it's difficult for her to be doing more extroverted things. She's in the perfect job. She works for a really great company. They do plumbing, and she knows a lot about it, and she runs the whole office and manages all the plumbers and even the boss, right? And, you know, she's in her element when she does that. You know, she can still answer the phone and deal with the customers and do all those kinds of things. But basically, you know, she works in an office and she's darn good at it. You know, she did before in a different type of a business prior to this one. And she's just really good at that stuff. But that's because she's an introvert. Like, you couldn't get me to sit at a desk. I would be going out of my mind if I had to do something like that. You know? It would just be too much. Hey, Doris. How is it down in South Carolina, I think, right? It's actually pretty warm here today. It was very seasonably nice. And so, you know, when somebody's an introvert and you're an extrovert, sometimes it's really hard to recognize where they're having difficulties and to be able to accommodate that if you can. So that's one of the things that is something that I keep in mind in making a living amends. That's kind of how I look at it. I'm making a living amends every day that I'm living. I'm working on, you know, being kind, not using sarcasm, not doing something I have to apologize for, not doing something I have to put somebody else on my list for. I mean, who wants to make a bigger list? Not me. So, you know, if you have people on your list and you just, like I said yesterday, be willing to make those amends at some point in your future, only because they're hurting you if you're hanging on to them. You know, they're saying if they're renting space in your mind, in your head, you know, they're there rent free, but you're allowing it. So that's one of the things you want to recognize. If it's still bothering you when you think about that, whatever that thing was that happened, if you, excuse me. Oh, there's like a little bit of dust there. Yeah. Got to take a sip of water. So for me, it's kind of important to recognize that, you know, there's some people that are on my list that maybe someday, you know, but thankfully there's only one, maybe two, I think, maybe two people that I would have a hard time doing that right now. But that's it. So not too bad for, you know, for where I am in life right now. So I can live with that. Oh yeah, Myrtle Beach, that's where she is. So yeah, you have to do that, right, Doris? I'm in my driveway, dear. I just pulled into my house. I got to go in a minute. I'm still cleaning that apartment. You guys have heard my trials and tribulations with that dirty tenant that left. Dirty, filthy, ugh. Anyways, it's all painted. It's all clean. I got to do the windows yet. So I was working on windows today. So I'm just getting home and getting my easy chair there. We'll watch some comedy on TV, I think. So when you make an amends and you have somebody who is right in front of you that you can do something, I have found too that sometimes if I'm willing to be willing, all of a sudden the Creator kind of puts that person in my path. You know, you run into them in the grocery store. You run into them at the park. Not run into them, but you know what I mean. We don't want to run them over. All of a sudden, they're there, and you have the opportunity. So take advantage of the opportunity when you can. Hey, Nick. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes happens is if I'm willing to be willing, the opportunity will present itself. It's almost kind of magical when that happens, you know. So I think that's important too, that, you know, I don't have to force anything. I can just allow those things to happen naturally, as life would have it, you know. So I think that's another nice piece about step 9 is as much as it is an action step, it's also a living step. So that's kind of my thoughts about step 9. And, you know, they all tie into each other on some levels. So, but I'm glad there's an order to them because it does make me think about them a little bit more often. And actually, I was in a meeting this morning. We were talking about the steps, and it's kind of nice how they all flow into each other. You know, if you go look them up, you can Google it, I'm sure. They're out there everywhere. And there's millions and millions of people in 12-step programs, and they use it for everything. I mean, they really are a program for living, not just for people in recovery. So it's nice that it's been adopted into a lot of different situations that people can utilize the 12 steps and make it work for them. So, yeah, God is good, you know. Creator is really quite amazing. A lot of things will come your way as you need them. And you need to be open and receptive to it. There's a cool little prayer I use. I'll share it with you. It's, Lord, tell me where to go, who to see, what to say, and when. And sometimes I just use that as a mantra. Where to go, who to see, what to say, and when. And that kind of covers it, doesn't it? So I learned that, gosh, a good 20 years ago at a big festival that I went to. And I just loved it. And I've shared it and I've hung on to it and I use it all the time. So that's kind of a cool one. You know, that kind of sets your day right. You start your day in the morning with that as a little mantra. And, you know, see what unfolds. See who you run into that day. See what thoughts come into your mind that day. See what opportunities present themselves that day. So I think it's kind of cool. And I like the fact that they're in the order that they're in because, you know, until you know yourself a little bit better, it's hard to do some of these things, these steps, the later on steps. But once you know yourself pretty good, and you recognize some of your attributes and your challenges and your characteristics, and you've done your inventory, you have a better idea of where you stand on the planet, you know, in regards to a relation with other people. And so then it makes it easier to do some of those things and to actually be who you really are meant to be. And to be authentic is one of the most, well, you know it when you see it, right? It's one of the most beautiful things. It's like you just right away have a comfort level with that person if they are authentically who they are. And it's nice to actually feel good in your own skin, you know. I'm my own best friend. I do what I do to take good care of myself. Self-care is important. And some of these steps are the way that I do those things. So I'm going to sign off in my usual manner. Okay, even though it's very dark right now, I will tell you that the sun is still shining out there, guys. Even if you live in Connecticut, beyond the darkness here, which is way up there, as you can see. I'm just getting out of the car. The sun is shining. It's still in California, so we know it's there. And it's always there. That's the beautiful part about this, right? The sun is always shining. So I'll sign off with that as my usual sign off. And I will see you guys tomorrow on step 10. We're already at step 10. But I have another whole series that I got for you too after this. So I think it's going to be cool. So signing off for now with love and light. Love you guys. Take good care of yourselves. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye for now.